I'm gonna teach you guys how to meal prep like Goku for an entire week. In my video where I tried the Goku diet, I tried a few different recipes, but I'm gonna show you how to make 2 of those for an entire week. The reason for that is the Goku diet video is a little chaotic, so I wanna be able to break this down for those of you who may not have time to make that each day. I don't have time to cook every single day, so I do make meal prep, and I wanna share that with you guys. The first dish is gonna be that Goku fried rice. This is more or less a traditional fried rice that you can make for meal prep. First thing you'll need is about 4 cups of short grain rice, and we're just gonna wash this. Once the rice is washed, I'm just gonna put it into my rice cooker. Now, the reason why this says it takes about an hour, realistically, is because of the rice cooker. Throw your water onto your rice and then into your rice cooker. While the rice is going, we can prep out a few more veggies, and it's not really gonna be too complicated. I'm gonna be using a ton of cabbage for both of these recipes. All I'm doing is taking this half a head of cabbage and removing the core. We're gonna take 1/4 of it and set it to the side for the other recipe. For the fried rice, I'm gonna make sure I cut my cabbage into nicer chunks. We don't want this to be too big because it is for fried rice. Just make sure you give this a nice chop, and this is gonna add a ton of bulk to your food. The other piece of cabbage is going to be for the Goku Black Noodles. This one I'm just gonna shred. You just want this to be super nice and thin to go along with those noodles. And alternatively, if you don't trust your knife skills, you can absolutely use a mandolin, which I highly recommend you use for any meal prep. Now I have my cabbage for my fried rice and for my noodles ready. And honestly, if you don't care about cabbage or you don't like it, you can just leave it out. I really enjoy cabbage, but it's yours, so you can make it however you want. Next is 1 bunch of green onions. You're gonna need green onions for both recipes, so this works out really well. I'm just gonna slice these somewhat thin, not gonna be too thin, because if they're too thin, they end up breaking down too much and kind of becoming mush when you go to microwave this or reheat it however you're going to. So I actually like to cut these a bit bigger than I normally would if I'm gonna be using these super fresh. Those are just the little things you kind of have to think about when you're meal prepping, so keep that in mind if you're doing this at home. If you wanna get super fancy, you can remove the white part of the green onion from the fresher, brighter green part, and we're gonna cook this and then finish with this. It just makes it a little nicer. But green onions, done. Next up is the big chunky onion. I love onions, and the onions don't love me apparently. How am I getting sensitized to green onions? It shouldn't happen. Both recipes are going to have the yellow onion in them, but again, we're gonna prepare them slightly differently than we would for each of them. Now for the Goku noodles, we're gonna cut these into not necessarily julienne, you're just gonna have a nicer sliver of onion. This is kind of what you're going for. Once you get to the halfway point, tip it over. Makes it safer to cut. Onions for the noodles are done. Now we can cut up the onions for the fried rice. This one we're gonna cut into a very nice small dice. Put away both of your onions once you're done with them. Next are some aromatics, in this case garlic and a bit of ginger. I'm using 3 whole cloves of garlic. Oh my god, I can't see. Onions are so strong. Once your garlic is peeled, just pop it to the side for now, and then we're gonna peel up this ginger. One great way to utilize the garlic and the ginger here is to use a microplane to make yourself a paste, but if you don't have a microplane, just use your knife. You can grate your ginger and then immediately grate your garlic right on top of it and just combine the two. Once you have that, you should have a bunch of ginger and garlic paste on the back. You're just gonna scrape all that goodness out. Any garlic or ginger that you couldn't use on the microplane, feel free to just chop this together. With your paste done, get it off your cutting board, and this will be good for both recipes. Now the biggest difference in the fried rice and the noodles is the fried rice will get egg. In this case, I'm doing 6 eggs. Give your eggs a quick whisk, make sure they're pretty broken down. They don't need to be perfect, like completely smooth, but just enough to where there's not like chunks of egg yolk in there. And most of our meal prep is done aside from the proteins, which are chicken breast and chicken thigh. The biggest reason why I'm using chicken breast and chicken thigh, honestly, is just preference. You can absolutely use one or the other for either of these recipes. All I need to do for both the chicken breast and the chicken thigh is cut them into decent 1/2-inch chunks. Once my chicken breast is cut up, I'm gonna take this and place it directly back into my bowl, but what I'm trying to really do is keep the chicken breast and the chicken thigh separate so we can cook them at slightly different times. Chicken thigh is being cut the same exact way. Now in total, I have about 4.5 pounds worth of chicken. The way I'm gonna split this is about 6 ounces for the fried rice because it's gonna get an egg, and then about 7 ounces-ish for the noodles. The next part is making the sauces, and this part is gonna be for the Goku Black Noodles, which is a relatively simple sauce, but you will need a few specialty ingredients. I need to measure out about 4 ounces of sake. If you can't have alcohol, please feel free to leave this out and use maybe just a little bit of water to help with a little bit of vinegar. Next is around 3 ounces of rice wine vinegar. Then just about 2 to 3 ounces of black vinegar. Next is some mirin, which is a Japanese cooking wine as well. We're gonna need around 2.5 ounces of that just about. And then finally, around 2 ounces of soy sauce. A big thing here that I like to do is taste it after I pour everything in. To me, I like this. Last but not least is around 1.5 tablespoons of cornstarch. This is going to thicken up the sauce when we cook it. Your Goku Black Noodle sauce is done. And speaking of the Goku Black Noodles, the last thing I really need to prep are the noodles. And in this case, I'm using Soba noodles or buckwheat noodles. Gandalf, this is not for you, sir. This is 6 portions of buckwheat noodle. And I'm just gonna be boiling all of this in my wok filled with some hot water. We're gonna cook these until they're al dente, which means they're not all the way done, so they still have a little firmness to them because you are gonna be reheating this later. And after about 5 or 6 minutes, all of this soba noodle is done. Soba noodles cook fairly quickly, so that's one nice thing for meal prep. I'm just gonna drain out all of this. And because I don't want these noodles to overcook at all, I'm gonna dip them into an ice bath and make sure they're completely cold. This way they don't continue to overcook. Now, since the rice still needs about 25 minutes to finish, we can actually finish meal prepping the Goku Black Noodles. Now, since I already used my wok to boil my noodles, I'm just gonna reuse the wok for everything else. If you don't have a wok, don't worry. Something like this will work just as well. I'm gonna start by adding around 10 to 15 milliliters of oil to the bottom of my pan. And then first, around half of my chicken thigh. Make sure you season it with a pinch of salt. After a few minutes, I'm just gonna stir this up and make sure the rest of the sides get kind of covered in the oil and the fats. And this is when I'm gonna add half of my chicken breast. Spread it out as evenly as you can, and I'm gonna cook this for about 3 or 4 minutes. Now, after a few more minutes of cooking the chicken, this is just about 3/4 of the way done. This is when I'm gonna throw in all of my onions. This way the onions don't overcook too much. That's gonna be a positive. With the onions, I'm gonna add just about half of my garlic and my ginger. We're gonna fry these up for just about a minute. All you're trying to do is get a bunch of the aromatics to release from the onions, the garlic, and the ginger. It's gonna add a lot of flavor here. Once the onions have softened slightly, so where they're kind of a little bendy, you know, that's when we're gonna add the cabbage. Now, I don't want my cabbage to fully cook down. I don't want it to be super mushy because, again, the plan is to reheat this again later. I'm only cooking this for an additional 2 or 3 minutes. Now, right at the end, this is when I'm gonna add all of our sauce. Make sure you give this a stir so none of that cornstarch settles at the bottom. I'm gonna cook this until the sauce starts to thicken. Look at how thick that sauce has become from the bottom. Last but not least, I'm gonna add some of the white part of my green onion, get this nice and warm. About 2.5 ounces of peanuts. Those are just salted raw peanuts. And now this, my friends, is ready to go. You can see how glistening and shiny and beautiful that looks. Kill the heat, and we can start plating this one up first, and then we're gonna finish the Goku fried rice. So we're gonna plate up the Goku Black Noodles, but if you want a Goku-sized portion, which we all know no one can actually eat, this is how you have to plate it up. Now, to plate these up, I'm using some washable bento boxes, and I'm just gonna kind of estimate how much noodle I need in each one. Because once you have your noodles in, we're just gonna start ladling a bunch of this right on top. This is gonna be so good. I'm actually really looking forward to this because this is gonna be part of my meal prep for the week. Once you have these all loaded up, this is when you can hit them with some of the fresh green onions. Yes, I know we're gonna microwave this later, it's okay. And then I'm gonna finish it with some black sesame seed. This is totally optional, but it adds a nice little toastiness to it. And there, my friends, is 5 portions of Goku Black Noodles. I'm gonna let these cool down while we finish the fried rice, and then we're gonna get macros for everything. Before we jump into the next recipe, I want to say thank you to today's sponsor, Into the AM, and their brand new fall collection. They just added a whole new line of pullover hoodies, Henleys, and button-ups to their website. I've also had a chance to wear their brand new joggers, and they are some of the most comfortable pants that I now own. They also have some brand new graphic tees added to this entire collection, and you can even pick up my very own Cyberpunk Cafe t-shirt that I collaborated with them on last year, featuring Gandalf and Lucian. So if you want to elevate your style a bit this fall, head to the link down below to Into the AM, and you can use code Chefpk for an additional 10% discount. That discount stacks with other sale items on the website, so you can save yourself a bunch of money and pick up some really cool stuff. That's intotheam.com using code Chefpk for an additional 10% off of your entire order. Now, for this second Goku meal plan. Now, because I used the wok earlier, and some of you guys might not have a wok, I'm just gonna use a regular pan for now. Everyone's gonna be mad because I used the wok for not the fried rice, but it's totally fine. First up is cooking off that second half of my chicken. I'm throwing in just a bit of salt like we did before, getting this pan nice and hot, and then just dropping our chicken thigh in first. I'm gonna cook this for about 3 or 4 minutes and then start to turn it so that way we get a little bit of browning on all of the sides. After a couple of minutes, the chicken should be browned on one of the sides, and this thing is like ripping hot. That's what we want. I'm gonna give this a nice stir, and then this is when I'm gonna throw in my chicken breast, and we're gonna cook this for an additional like 3 or 4 minutes. After a few minutes, give your chicken a stir. Get grease everywhere because that's part of meal prep. Now after a couple of minutes, I'm gonna throw in the rest of my garlic and my ginger, along with some of those white parts of the green onions, the diced white onion, and I'm gonna give that a nice stir and cook down those onions just a little bit. After a few minutes of the onions now being cooked, I'm gonna throw in the wrong cabbage. Yes, I used the wrong cabbage for the Goku Black Noodles, but that's okay. You may be asking, Paul, how on earth are you gonna get the rice in there? We're not. Now once that cabbage has softened, this is ready to go, and this is when it just goes literally onto a sheet tray. Now I did say fried rice, but I didn't say chicken fried rice. The biggest reason why I'm not doing a traditional fried rice is simply because we don't have any way of cooking that much fried rice without a flat top. So in this case, we're gonna try to do it the best we can, so this way it's convenient for us throughout the rest of the week. In this fried rice, we get 250 grams of rice per serving. That's how much rice we get to meal prep with. Now because we have no way of making a traditional fried rice, we're gonna make a fake fried rice. This is mostly because we're doing meal prep and we're trying to make it as convenient for us as possible. But I still have to cook off the egg, and so that's the last thing that we really need to do. I'm gonna hit my egg with just a touch of soy sauce to give it a little bit of flavor. And then we're gonna fry this egg up. Give your eggs a quick stir. It'll kind of scramble them just a little bit. I'm gonna turn my heat down so they don't get too dark. And legitimately, after about 60 seconds, maybe give this a stir, and these eggs are done. Now, the last thing we need to do is plate these bad boys up. And again, I'm just kind of guessing as to how much rice I need for each one. If you want to be super accurate, you can weigh these out again. Once you have the rice in there, throw the egg on top of the rice first. And remember, we also get all of this food. This is a lot, man. And again, I am just eyeballing most of this. I'm gonna top this off with the fresh green onion as well, and a bit of black sesame. And there's 4 portions of Goku rice, fried rice. It's food on top of rice. Now, if you want to take some of this to go and you want to be super fancy, you can just grab yourself your favorite bento box and use that instead of any of the recyclable ones. These tend to heat up really well and hold food a lot hotter. And then all of this goes onto this one last bento. And there, my friends, is a beautiful bento of Goku fried rice, but not really. Now I have 10 meals ready throughout the entire week. You can have one for breakfast and one for dinner, and maybe make something different for lunch, or have something for breakfast and have one for lunch and one for dinner. I'm actually eating the Goku rice, and this one comes out to 686 calories, 57 grams of protein, 14 grams of fat, and 80 grams of carbohydrates. If you decide to go with the noodles for your food, you're gonna get 633 calories, 68 grams of protein, 13 grams of fat, and 64 carbohydrates. Both of these dishes are super substantial and fairly easy to make. If you have the rice made ahead of time, you can make all of this in under an hour very easily. This took me just a little bit over the hour because we had to wait for the rice, but now I have to clean everything. If you guys want a full guide on how to make Goku food for an entire week, I'll have a guide down below for you guys over on my website. My name is Chefpk, and remember, keep playing with your food.